Good day, goeiedag, fellow South Africans, from a really warm Brisbane, and it's now about 7 p.m, so your time it'll be about midday or before that. But I came across this video in the South African Parliament that has been totally overlooked by everyone, and it is incredibly important. Okay, now we're talking about race relations, okay, when we're talking about South Africa, the Rainbow Nation and stuff like that. There's an organization there called the Institute of Race Relations, and attached to this video will be their time in front of the South African Parliament talking about the impact of expropriation of land without compensation. And I am so surprised that this has never been raised before. Okay, here's just an overview, and you can watch the video which follows. This is an extremely relevant and informative video taken in the South African Parliament in the last few days. It has seen no airplay on YouTube, none. Nudger. Maybe they'll put another strike on because I put this on, but who knows? So watch and see how twisted the South African Parliament is. I covered this subject comprehensively earlier today. In other words, I talked about the expropriation of land without compensation, and if they were going to do it, how they should do it. Okay? The Institute of Race Relations, who the representative here speaking here, is under fire in the South African Parliament by no less than the EFF and members of the ANC. So a very interesting discussion with a left-wing group, because the Institute of Race Relations are a left-wing group. They're not a right-wing group. They're not racist. They're race relations, okay? And they've been going since 1929 and advocating races working together. So, let's get back to what I was saying. A very interesting discussion with a left-wing group supporting the concept of protecting property rights. Okay? They want to support property rights. This guy from I'll call it the IRR, is right on the nail. Quote in here by the EFF parliamentarian, which you'll see in the video if you watch it. If we expropriate land without compensation, the blacks will suffer. I want to check with you, are the most suffering people not the blacks? And the most people without land are the blacks. And the blacks in this country are in the majority. Okay, so what she's talking about is his suggestion that property cannot be expropriated without compensation. It's got to be, you've got to compensate people for their property. It's the whole basis of the economy. I mean, that's like, Finance 101, okay? The IRR guy says in reply, what you are opening up is a Pandora's box, and the economy is going to suffer if you dare tamper with land rights. You're going to go like Zimbabwe, which is what I talked about in my earlier video. So the IRR, which is, again, the Institute of Race Relations, so they've like been one of the original parties saying, hey, we've all got to work together as a humanity. The IRR has been since 1929 battling for a non-racial society in South Africa. What are the consequences I foreshadow? the consequences are not blocks of land, but there will be a radical deterioration in the economy for blacks and whites concerned. Now, that's what the IRR guy says in this video. And he also says land must be expropriated with compensation. Get that? Okay, I'll attach the video to this, and you can see for yourself. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you and keep you informed of what's going on. Take care, guys.
Gonna ask, I think the resolutions are here. All right, you please get set.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
My name is Martin Brassey. I'm a senior counsel at the bar. I'm assisted here by Mr. Krauser. Anthea Jeffrey prepared the report on behalf of the Institute. She is unwell. She would have liked to have been here, and she tenders her apologies. It's a pity she isn't here, because she would be able to give you a better informed view than I can, because my view is essentially derived from the reports that are before you. Those reports are twofold. There is a summary that is before you, and there is a detailed report that you have been provided with. And from what I've heard earlier, it's clear to me that the reports are read, and I'll work on the basis of what they say. What the reports seek to do is to deal with the question of the facts. What is actually happening? How did our distribution of land actually take place? What kind of complex conflicts have actually happened in the past? What their upshot is? And the question of attitudinal facts as well. To what extent are people concerned about land distribution, and to what extent are they concerned in our society about matters that go way beyond that question? Because unless we locate this debate, we submit within the proper context of the economy as a whole, what we tend to do is become preoccupied with detail. The second thing that the report does, and does fully, is explore the consequences that will follow if there is a significant erosion of property rights in this country. And the notion has been postulated that there should be nationalization of land, that is a good idea in the circumstances. But what we submit on behalf of the Institute is that the consequences of the nationalization of land in this country will be a significant impoverishment of the population as a whole, and the bulk of the population, the black bulk of the population, will suffer those consequences the worst. And we urge, therefore, that the whole question of the constitutional change be considered very, very carefully indeed, as indeed with respect this committee is doing. Now, there are different strains of thought, as far as I see, as far as the Institute observes, in the political arena. The one is that the Constitution does not need amending at all. The second is that it needs amending in order to clarify what is contemplated as unfairness within the construct of the constitutional provision, Section 25, because its fulcrum is fairness. It operates on the principle of fairness. And it operates on the principle of fairness by reference to this. And you're all aware of this, but I need to re-articulate it. It is central to the conception of fairness that an individual should not bear the consequences of societal improvement in circumstances where those consequences should not be visited on that individual's shoulders. So the notion that you can selectively go to one particular farm, take it away from an individual, and not give that individual compensation is thoroughly to undermine the question of property rights, because the compensation element is essential, it's a cardinal feature of what it means to give property rights to people. So the second issue is to what extent there's going to be a reduction in the capacity of individuals to insist on proper compensation. And the answer is either that there should be a lesser amount of compensation, or secondly, that there should be no compensation at all. Well, either of those two criteria will basically open up a significant erosion of property rights, the consequence of which will be seriously damaging to the economy of the society, and let us face it too, seriously damaging to questions of human rights. And if this committee were to conclude that it would be appropriate selectively to target white people on the grounds that they are white for the purposes of redistribution of land without compensation, I venture to suggest to you from my experience, which is fairly considerable, of the Constitutional Court, transformed though it be, transformed as it is, that the Constitutional Court will not accept at the individuated level notions that you can go selectively and take one farm, take another farm, and not pay those farmers compensation. We've read in the press about the list of, a supposed list of 150 or 200 farms that have been targeted already for expropriation. I don't know what the status of this. I don't think it matters for present purposes. What matters for present purposes is that the example can be taken and can be dealt with in order to demonstrate for you that if farms are targeted on the basis of race for redistribution, then that is a process that is fraught with peril. The third situation that is postulated is the notion that that there should be a complete nationalization of land. It can take various forms. It can take the form of custodianship. It can take form of a provision that says all land shall be nationalized and vest in the state. Or it can take the form of a provision that says all land shall vest in the state and then be distributed in the state's discretion, which obviously opens the way to corruption to a range of different people that the state considers appropriate. Any one of those particular situations completely undermines the compact that was concluded in 1994 and thoroughly undermines the notion of protected property rights. So the choice is a fundamental choice that you experience. It is an absolutely fundamental choice. Are you going to ultimately sanction the watering down of property rights with the consequences for the economy and the consequences for human rights? Because, kid you not, the element of property ownership is a central feature and is recognized as a central feature of human rights. Are you going to countenance those, or are you going to observe the current compact that is dealt with, not because it's a compact that was struck in 1994, but because it's a compact that is struck around considerations of fairness, and that is a central and fundamental feature of Section 25, and ask the state then, ask the ANC government, if you like then, to do the job that that section legitimates, which is to do the process of transformation, to provide the requisite grants, to provide the skills and so on, in order to uplift people. The Institute is a non-racial body, but what the Institute does not do is countenance the notion that one can be blind to our past. We sit on the backs of a history that must be redressed. I've heard other people saying that, and saying that with passion, and rightly so. There is, and the Institute entirely accepts that. What the Institute asks us to do is to explore the mechanisms that are available to us now, and not to regard the amendment of the Constitution as a sensible option in the circumstances. Why? Because it will ultimately deflect from the process we are truly concerned with. I want to tell you, before I cease, I want to tell you a little bit about the Agri-SA judgment, because I happen to argue that matter, and I've read and written about that. The Agri-SA judgment was about mineral rights. What happened in that judgment was it went to the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court, by a majority, accepted the notion that there can be custodianship of property, and that can be done by way of statute under the existing Constitution, under the existing provisions. But it did so in circumstances where it recognized that the current interests, the current vested interests in mineral rights would have to be respected, and that was part of the compact. Now, the respecting, the parallel for the respecting of mineral rights that pre-existed is the parallel of respecting the interests of current property holders. So you can put, if you must, it is a bad idea, but you can put, if you must, the property in the hands of, to treat it as subject to custodianship. But ultimately you are left with a fundamental question. Who is going to occupy that property? Who is going to exploit it? Who is going to use it? Who is going to turn it to production? And inevitably, you find yourself on the other side of the fence with the proposition that the current people who occupy will continue to occupy and produce and so on and so forth. And the redistribution will still be the problem that it exists at the moment. So the Institute asks you, and asks you in an impassioned way, it asks you to recommend no change to the Constitution, but a thoroughgoing and vigorous exploitation of the capacity that Section 25 gives you, the ANC government, in order to, through soft loans, through support services, through expertise, and so on and so forth, through the streamlining of the land claims situation, which has not been satisfactory, through the streamlining of redistribution, to make sure that our society is more prosperous than it is. I don't have to tell you today what is the situation of the economy. I don't have to tell you today what is the situation of the rand. You are familiar with that. Those are the ambient circumstances we have to deal with, and those are the ambient circumstances.
Thank you, Advocate. Thank you very much. Clarity, members? Dr. Mutsecha, Honorable Maile, Honorable Mutapo, Honorable Swart, Honorable Fultane, Honorable Mukwili, Honorable Posik, you. Who else?
And Honorable Kata.
Honorable Kata.
And Honorable Mpumlwana.
Honorable Mpumlwana. You've had your list here. Honorable Mutsecha.
My learned friend, are you not losing sight of the fact that there are human and people's rights, and that in Africa, given the colonial and apartheid past, we can only talk about human rights. We must talk about people's rights to address the fundamental unfairness, and that therefore to even suggest targeting of white people would be misleading, because this process seeks to address the fundamental unfairness to the majority of the people, not to any section of the people. And that's why the architect of the Constitution made Section 25 reviewable, and this process is therefore being undertaken according to the spirit and the letter of the Constitution, and therefore it cannot be said and should not be said that it is targeting any section of our population.
Any comment, Advocate?
Yes, I'm indebted to you for that.
Honorable Maile.
To be me, he will follow. Thank you, Chairperson. Race relations, you are complaining about adequate time, saying that the closing date was supposed to be 15 July this year. But this committee gave all people 30 days, and there was a request. We complied as a committee to give all additional 15 days, and then it was 45 days. So I need to clarify that. And on the colloquium, you are complaining that it was a done deal. It isn't. This committee has never taken a decision on amendment. Hence, this process we are embarking on. So there's not a done deal. Each and every political party here has got its own position on this issue, but not this committee. So that needs to be rectified. And the views of president of ANC, like any other president of a political party, he has a right to say the views of his political party. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Honorable Mutapa, you are nicely out of order. Who was next to speak? Oh, Honorable Maile.
No, thanks very much, Chair. Chair, if I'm out of order, you'll bear with me. But you know, when I was listening to this presentation, it was like I was looking at a scarecrow. We are just being told that we should never do anything because people are going to be poor, whereas people are already poor now. And you know, what I want to check is, do these advices come now that the matter is on the table, or have they always been there? What have you been doing all along to assist government in reaching out? Thanks.
Another nice out of order. Who's next? Mr. Honorable Swart, yes.
Thank you for the very, very extensive submission. And just directly to the point, the discussion has been largely about land. But how would expropriation without compensation affect property other than land, like vehicles, movable properties, intellectual property rights, given Section 25(3)(b)? Thank you.
Could I answer that, Chair?
Yes.
Of course, you're absolutely right. The concept of property under Section 25 is not confined to land, and particularly not confined to agricultural land. It extends to property generally, and there is no logical reason, as I can understand it, as in the Institute can understand it, why once you're embarked upon the notion that you can expropriate property without compensation, you can't expropriate property of exactly the sort that you mentioned. Yeah. And the consequence of that, and we must understand that, the consequence of that from a human rights point of view is that the people who've injected effort and time and conscientiously worked towards the acquiring of a motor car, the acquiring of a house, or whatever it may be, are themselves going to be the subject of potential expropriation by definition without compensation, or with compensation too little to justify their investment. And that's a very serious thing.
You can proceed. Are you done, Advocate?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. So sorry. I've done that.
Yeah, all right. Honorable Mukweli.
Thank you very much, Chair. Advocate, I want you to explain to me how do you argue the issue of fairness within the context of intergenerational land dispossession and equality? And if I heard you correctly, you are saying when we expropriate or we nationalize, the blacks will suffer. Now, I want to check with you. Are you not aware that as it stands now, the most suffering people are the blacks, and the most people without land are blacks, and the blacks in this country are in majority. So explain to me what suffering will it be if the majority will be allowed to access a property or a let me put it in that sense, a property that will give them dignity. How will suffering be in your own term?
I want to make it absolutely clear that the Institute is in favor of the redistribution of land and property generally. That the Institute is in favor of that at an extensive level and believes that the current policies have been poorly handled and significantly produced the consequences that we see today. You then ask me how I recommend that, or rather the Institute recommends that it should be done, and the answer is by reference to considerations of fairness. You ask me how fairness should be dealt with, and I want to put it to you on this basis. Fairness has been defined within the labour context in a number of cases by the highest courts of this land, and it means a proper balance should be struck between the considerations of the party on the one side and the considerations of the party on the other side. You strike balances. It is not to strike a balance to take selectively from people in order to redistribute to others. It is not to strike a balance without giving compensation. And the topic that you're confronted with is not expropriation as such, it is expropriation without compensation. The consequence of that is a dramatic imbalance unless you bring into account the factors that are already specified in Section 25. And those haven't been tested yet. You've heard this, you've heard it from me, you've heard it from others, you've heard it from our report. It has not been tested yet. And unless you test it, what you are opening up is a Pandora's box, and the economy is going to suffer. You asked me, Madam, Honourable Madam, you asked me whether I do not understand the suffering of black people. If you had any understanding of my own experience in this country, you would not have asked that question of me. If you ask it of the Institute of Race Relations, the Institute would respond as it has since 1929 been struggling for a non-racial and democratic society here. You ask me, Madam, what are the consequences that I foreshadow? The consequences are not that black people's lots are being improved, not that white people's lots are being improved, but there will be a radical deterioration in the economy with radical consequences for black and white concerned. And that is how I would answer you on that.
Can I have follow-up, Chair?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair. You know,
Caution the speaker against his condescending way of addressing our member, please. And you can laugh, white man.
so, Chair, in the response from advocate about fairness, I did mention the ratio or numbers statistically. Blacks are in majority. And blacks, it's a fact, advocate that they were dispossessed of their land. Now, if we deal with the fairness of redistribution, with the fairness of possession of land, how are you going then to make sure that those that were dispossessed and were unfairly, injustices were unfairly done to them are going to benefit if we don't expropriate without compensation? In your term, Chair.
Advocate.
Can I answer, Chair? The answer is simple, with respect, and I hope I'm not sounding condescending. Thank you, because I certainly don't intend to. The answer is simple, that you expropriate with compensation. And if the compensation must be paid, it must be paid by levying taxes. And you levy taxes from the people on a progressive basis who are primarily rich in order to effectuate the thing. This is, I am trying to suggest to you, the notion that there will be expropriation without compensation is essentially a breach of the principle of fairness and is a red herring, because the fundamental principle is, how do you effectively make sure that the black majority, as you put it, is properly represented within property rights in this country? And the answer is by redistribution through conventional channels that postulate fairness.
Thank you, Advocate. Fulton, Honourable Fultana.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. The Institute is not blind to our past. That's what you said, essential. We can replay. That's what you said, essential. I may not have quoted you exactly verbatim, but I'm over 90% there. Now, our past will tell you in the issue of land that this land was taken at the barrel of a gun. Now, where do you get this idea that people who grabbed the land at the barrel of a gun must be compensated? What is the foundation for that? Coming from an institute that says you are not blind to the past. Now, how do you build up this whole concept that people must be paid for land which they grabbed at the barrel of a gun? When there are millions of people, we haven't got land exactly as a result of that past history. Are you speaking with a double tongue?
No, I don't think so. I think you do an injustice to the actual history of the country. The report that the Institute puts up explains exactly how the dynamic of warfare inter-race, inter-tribe, inter-community warfare has occurred in this country, such as to produce the distributions that we have. It is a natural consequence of every society, sir, and you're fully familiar with this fact, that land is ultimately appropriated in two ways. Firstly, by sitting on it. Secondly, by grabbing it from somebody else. It is in nature because land sits there and it has to be gained in that way. How you deal with it afterwards is a matter of careful thought amongst people who are engaged in the process of governance. Ultimately, you have to protect property rights because otherwise you don't have a stable society based on human rights, based on the rule of law, and so on. And you find yourself in a situation where you are a pariah of the world and your subpopulation is suffering. We have cited the example of Venezuela. It makes appalling reading, and you're familiar with it because you've read the brief. It is not part of our brief that we shouldn't redistribute. It is part of our brief that we should redistribute, but redistribute wisely, carefully, and within the parameters of fairness that are set by the constitutional provision.
Honourable
Follow-up, Chair, please, if I may.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Look, blacks owe nobody an explanation for reclaiming their land. And this parliament is following the constitutional route to do it. They do not have to explain to people why this land must be returned. There's no government that will ever have enough money to buy its own land. That doesn't exist because the people who have got the land keep pushing the prices up. Ultimately, government might have to spend all of its budget rebuying land that was grabbed at the barrel of a gun. That process is just not on.
So we have examined and carefully examined in the report the manner in which money has been expended in this country and the budget that has been assigned.
That's got nothing to do with land.
No.
The budget that has been assigned.
Advocate, the follow-up wasn't a follow-up.
I'm sorry?
So I think the debate can continue on a different platform between the two of you. You must charge him, Advocate, when he engages you. All right. Honourable Paulson.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just want to answer the advocate. We are going for the third option, full nationalization, where the state is the only custodian of all land. That's the option we're going for, to answer that question. I wanted to ask you how land expropriation without compensation will further impoverish landless people, because that is what you said. But my more important question is are you financed by AfriForum? Because I see you removed them from your website.
Yeah, that one also, to reply that one, Advocate, put a fee on it, and in a different platform.
They were,
Take
but
the
who
first one.
finances you?
All right, just one question that is asked.
Well, sir, apparently I speak with a forked tongue, a double tongue, so I must be financed by two people. But actually, I'm financed by nobody in this. I'm a member of the Advisory Council of the Institute, and in the absence of Anthea Jeffrey, they've asked me to step in and come to speak to this committee, which is a great privilege for me to do so, and I do it on that basis. And I'm indebted to you for telling me what is the policy of the EFF. If you want to know what that policy will do and how it will make ordinary people poorer, you have only to look around at comparative experiences elsewhere.
Honorable Carter.
Thank you, Chairperson. Well, it was ultimately the taxpayers' money that paid, and it's not government's money, it's taxpayers' money. Well, just to get to the point, Advocate, please, what do you think would be the consequences, what is the consequences you foresee for all South Africans if our current property rights are eroded? And what do you foresee the consequences would be with the UN Declaration of Human Rights from sort of the international side? Thank you.
Carter, you're requesting a legal opinion now on, it's not a subject matter. It's really not a subject matter. Anyway, we're out of time. Thank you, Advocate, for making it. Who's that? Oh, Bumlan. All right, you're the last one on the, yes, no, thank you.
Chair, but you're wrong. It was a follow-up about
What,
all
your
South
follow-up?
Africa.
No, I'm just saying, was it a follow-up? But you are following up on what, Carter? Because this is your first part.
On a reply that the Advocate gave about all South Africans.
Sorry? No, Honorable Carter, you got it wrong altogether. Honorable Mpumlwana?
Baba, I am honestly disappointed. However, because when I look at your paper, I have been trying to find solutions that can assist us when we debate this matter. All I hear is history, what the ANC has done, being a communist, what Ramaphosa is not doing, has been doing, and so on. May I respectfully request you to try and assist us in solving. I think if you belong to the race relations, you don't belong to one race. And so, may I be protected against people? Yeah, but that is the duty of the chairperson. Can you please keep quiet? And don't say anything.
Yeah, come, Pumlwana, time is over, sir. Just put your point, your clarity question.
Yeah. You said that this economy is going to suffer if there is expropriation without compensation. That will be the consequence. And you say the African people are going to starve. And I thought that that is too much. I don't know. I think that perhaps I'm trying to find out how you're going to suffer if you are able to do that. Because at the moment, there are a lot of people that are suffering, particularly in the farms. They cannot be assisted by the government. They can't build houses for them, can't do anything. How are these perhaps 3.5 million people in the farms going to suffer more than they are suffering now? Thank you.
Advocate, I think what is left for me is to thank you on behalf of the race relations for
is my question out of order?
Yes.
Or are we out of time?
Yes, and out of time anyway. All right, so we want to thank you very much for making yourselves available to enrich the process. Thank you very much. Members,